Welcome to Investor in the Family Radio, a podcast about learning to invest. My name is Brian Bain, and I'm your host. At Investor in the Family Radio, we believe that every dollar and minute we spend is an investment in something, and together, we're going to make the best investments that we can. So thank you so much for joining us. And on today's show, we have Mark Hibben back on the show. We had Mark on a few weeks ago, had a great time. But today, he's on the show because next week, September 7th, Apple's having their annual event where they're expected to release all the new information about the new iPhone, as well as a lot of other new products as well, or new versions of products, I should say, possibly new products. We don't know yet. So in this interview, we're going to dive deep into the upcoming September 7th Apple event to figure out what everything we should be expecting or looking forward to about the new iPhone 7. We're also going to spend a few minutes talking about the big EU tax decision that recently took place as far as Apple and their tax shelters in Ireland and the big penalties that are coming from that. Anyway, but the main focus is on the upcoming Apple event. We're going to talk about everything as far as all the rumors, all the expectations about the new iPhone, whether or not we should be excited, whether or not we should be bored, and whether or not we should be expecting some kind of augmented reality device to come out this or next week as well. But we will see. And in this interview, we're going to dive into all of it with Mark Hibben. So be sure and stay tuned and hope you'll enjoy the show. Remember, our goal here is to help you learn to invest. That's financially and in all of life. You can always find more at investorinthefamily.com. I've been mentioning it for the last few weeks, and it's almost here on September 12th. The second online investing conference will kick off, and the conference is fully online, no travel, anything required. And we're going to have, at this point, we have two fantastic investors. We have Brett Jensen and Cody Willard. It's going to be a fully growth investing focused conference. And Brett and Cody are both going to share their two highest conviction investments that they typically would reserve only for their premium newsletter subscribers. These are investments that they're recommending that they own themselves. And they're going to talk about the picks, their research. There's going to be a video to watch, slides to download, all that kind of great stuff. Typically, this kind of access would cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to get stuff like this from these guys. But up until September 7th, that's Wednesday of next week, you can get free. You can register for free for the conference. Go to onlineinvestingconference.com. That's onlineinvestingconference.com. There should be links in the show notes and on my website as well. If you want to sign up for our email list, text the word join family, one word, join family, to the number 44222. You'll get emailed information about registering there as well. But don't forget, the online investing conference free registration ends next Wednesday, September 7th, and you get the top highest conviction investment picks from Brett Jensen and Cody Willard. Looking so much forward to that. And today, I hope you'll enjoy the interview with Mark Hibben. Well, hey, Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Well, hey, a few weeks ago, we came on and we had a great dialogue about different things going on with Tesla and with Apple, and thought we solved all the world's problems, but apparently there are a few things left for us.
Only
a few. Well, personally, the new iPhone launch coming up is keeping me up at night. Not really, but so there's a lot to talk about with this new iPhone reveal coming out probably within the next few weeks. And then even more recently, we've had this big EU decision about Apple and tax bills and stuff. Do you mind kicking us off by giving us a little bit of a download on the EU decision?
Well, I actually wrote about it a few weeks ago when the Brexit vote came out and Britain decided to bail out of the economic union. So it's fairly fresh on my mind. I'm probably going to antagonize a few Apple fans, but I actually think Apple's attitude about taxes is kind of deplorable. Tim Cook was asked a while back, well, why don't you repatriate that roughly $200 billion that you've got sitting overseas? And his response was, because I'd have to pay 30% in taxes on it. And, I thought about that and I said, well, a lot of us pay an effective tax rate that's higher than 30%. Well, why is that so onerous for Apple? And, I think that, there can be a lot of debate about, what the right corporate tax rate is. And I think Apple has made a good point, a good case that the corporate tax rate should be lower. That would stimulate economic growth and technology development and so forth, and that's fine. But at the end of the year, come April 15th, we all just pay our taxes,
right.
no matter how we feel about it, and I'm sure most of us feel like we pay too much in tax, but, why is Apple somehow exempt? The whole thing in Ireland, when I looked into it, was really, really kind of dodgy. I mean, they set up this what they call a double Irish tax scheme, where one Irish subsidiary is considered tax resident, and it would be liable for taxes on the profits of that subsidiary. And all of the revenue and all the income that Apple was generating internationally was being funneled into that tax resident subsidiary. But they ended up not paying any tax, not even the very low 12.5% Irish corporate tax rate. And how did they do that? Well, because there was another Irish subsidiary that wasn't considered tax resident. And that Irish subsidiary, the non-tax resident subsidiary, was actually licensing the resident subsidiary, and the license fees were draining all the profit, all the income out of the resident subsidiary into the non-resident subsidiary. So in effect, the resident subsidiary had no profit to tax. So this wasn't about just minimizing a tax bill. This was about paying no tax whatsoever. That all that overseas money was completely untaxed. It wasn't taxed in the U.S. It wasn't taxed in the EU. It wasn't taxed in Ireland. It wasn't taxed anywhere.
Yeah. At some point, you have to look at that and say, seriously? I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
No, I think but even then, and this is something a lot of people don't realize, the objection of the EU is not the tax regime per se, not even the double Irish scheme. They're not objecting to. What they're objecting to is that they're claiming that Ireland basically created this scheme for Apple's benefit, and Apple was one of the few companies, one of the few corporations in the world that did benefit from it. And as far as the EU is concerned, that's considered state aid, and that's a no-no. And the EU is just a glorified economic club. I see a lot of comments trying to portray the EU as this sort of onerous, bureaucratic, supranational government. They're not really anything like that. They're just a club, and the members of the club join willingly, and they can leave willingly, like Great Britain did. And in return for the ostensible benefits of being in the club, and the benefits are certainly debatable, but in return for those benefits, the club members agree to abide by the rules and regulations of the club. And one of the important rules and regulations of the club was that the member countries not essentially creates or create state aid or tax benefits that they would preferentially give to particular companies, because that was the situation that existed before the EU was created. You had all the different countries in Europe basically promoting their own domestic businesses and industries, and providing preferential treatment for those domestic businesses and industries. And if you're trying to create a sort of a level playing field for all of Europe, and sort of create a situation that almost looks like a unified nation, except it isn't really, but in an economic and trade sense, that was what they were going for. Then you had to outlaw that kind of preferential state aid, because that would just completely throw a monkey wrench into the works. So that's their objection with Ireland. It's not even the tax benefits that Apple received. And another thing that's important to remember is that the EU can't tax anybody. It can't tax Apple. It can't tax Ireland. It doesn't tax anyone except its own employees. So the EU is only supported by essentially membership dues of the separate companies, of the separate countries, and that's what actually supports the European Union. So the European Union can't tax Apple. What it's doing is it's basically telling Ireland, look, if you want to stay in the club, you're going to have to collect this back tax from Apple.
So in the end, is this really that big of a deal for Apple?
I don't think Ireland's going to be able to collect the money, because I don't see how you do that. I mean, normally when a national government tries to collect back taxes, it doesn't try to collect back taxes where there were no taxes owed under its own laws and regulations.
Right.
And under the laws and regulations of Ireland, Apple doesn't owe any tax. Yeah. So how do they collect this $14.5 billion? I don't see how they do it. I don't think Apple will ever actually have to pay the money, is my bottom line conclusion on that.
Of course, I guess the biggest impact would be, how does it affect these type structures moving forward, and how Apple shelters its money, and then whether or not they move it around, repatriation otherwise. I guess that's probably the biggest impact, and that remains to be unknown. Yeah.
I think they might. The corporate tax rate in Ireland is still very low. I mean, it's among the lowest anywhere. But when I wrote the article on Brexit, I did speculate that, well, maybe Apple would move their headquarters to Great Britain, because that would take it out of the European Union and kind of solve that problem going forward. But I'm not sure they would get a better break from Great Britain than they would get from Ireland, even at 12.5%. That's kind of my take on that whole situation.
No, it's helpful. I mean, that's obviously big in the news right now, and a lot of people are wondering how big of a deal that is for Apple, and actually what's going on behind the scenes. And so that is helpful. I am especially eager to hear with the upcoming and the anticipation of the upcoming new iPhone reveal and release. I'm excited to hear you just download what you're expecting, everything from when you're expecting to hear from Apple, and what you're expecting them to actually show us in this new iPhone, and what it's going to be called.
Everyone's pretty sure it's going to be iPhone 7, because Apple's already sent out invitations for the event, right? It's going to be September 7th.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. And the invitation said, see you on the 7th. And so the emphasis on the 7 seems to indicate that it really will be called iPhone 7.
Sure. They've definitely set a pretty clear precedent for that so far, but that isn't, you never know.
Yeah, there was a lot of speculation, but I think it was in the vein of the non-innovative iPhone, where the speculation was, well, this is so non-innovative that it won't even be given its own separate numerical designation as it would traditionally. And so they were saying it was going to be like the iPhone 6SE or something like that. And I think that really was just another way of kind of disparaging the next iPhone.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting here with an iPhone 5, so am I going to want to upgrade?
Probably, yeah, because the reason to upgrade is always that a certain number of iPhone models and iPad models and iOS devices sort of fall off the table with each successive generation of iOS because they're not supported anymore, and so I think iPhone 4S definitely drops off this year with iOS 10. I'm trying to remember if iPhone 5 does. I think iPhone 5 will probably be good for another year.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's still working great. So as long as it's working, I'm probably going to stick with it. But my threshold.
Yeah, it's a great phone.
Do what?
Yeah, it's a great phone.
Yeah, my threshold was, once this new one, the iPhone 7 comes out, I'm officially in the green to get a new iPhone. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, sure.
So what are you expecting? Like, we've talked before about the disparagement of Apple, how this new phone is not going to be innovative at all, and it's going to be boring and stuff. And you mentioned that's probably a little bit of overkill. So what are you expecting?
Yeah. Well, I think that the rumors have I think probably pretty well converged to the reality. That it is true that as we get closer and closer to the release date, the rumors do tend to converge to the correct results. So I think we are going to see another aluminum unibody phone that is similar in design to the current iPhone 6s. We will see one or more antenna bands more or less disappear. I've been saying that the elimination of one of the bands, which they typically show in all of these various rumor mock-ups that you see, where they just have one band that kind of arcs across the top edge of the phone. That has to stay there in some form, because the whole antenna design that Apple patented, and they actually did get a patent for this, really requires that there be a gap in the metal at that point, and that's what that band is actually doing. Is it's a plastic filler of the gap in the metal case, and that's essential for the antenna to work properly. So that still needs to be there, but on the other hand, it doesn't have to stand out quite as much as it typically gets shown in all the rumors. Apple also patented this material where they claimed in the patent that the material resembles anodized aluminum. So presumably, if they use the technology in the patent, they can make the antenna bands almost invisible. And I suspect that that's probably where they're going to go, that not only will we see one of the bands go away completely, but even the band that's remaining will be much less conspicuous than it was in the previous generation. So those are the sort of the superficial changes that we'll see. And then the screen is still going to be LCD. No one expects anything other than that, but it probably will get the color gamut upgrade that was first made available in the iPad Pro 9.7-inch version. That screen got very high reviews, and I think it's the best type of screen available, even including OLED. So I expect that technology to be incorporated in this generation iPhone, as well as any iPads or other iOS devices going forward. I think they're going to use that same technology. For as long as they're using LCDs, which will probably be another generation, at least this generation, and possibly even the next generation. Although the rumors are all saying that in 2017 they're going to switch to OLED. I don't know about that, but that's the rumor for next year. See, the rumors for next year have already started.
Well, of course.
Sometimes I think that the whole point of the rumors is to just make us so sick and tired of hearing about iPhone.
We got to give Mark and Brian something to talk about.
That by the time the iPhone 7 actually arrives, we'll be so sick and tired of it, we won't even care.
Well, and we got to fuel those Samsung commercials as well with some nice fodder.
Right. So anyway, back to what other things are going on with the phone. Well, there's the elimination of the headphone jack. The analog jack is almost certainly going away, and that's going to be replaced by a set of headphones that Apple provides that just connect through the Lightning port, and then they'll probably also make a Lightning adapter so that you can use regular analog headphones.
Yeah, my next question was going to be: does that mean my Bose noise cancellation headphones are obsolete?
Well, they are anyway, and the reason they are because the technology that is being developed for the Lightning headphones includes, and this is being developed by Cirrus, which has been a long-standing chip supplier to Apple. Cirrus has developed the chips to support the Lightning headphones. And one of the new capabilities is a much more effective form of noise cancellation than was previously available in analog headphones. And the reason why the noise cancellation works so much better is because through the Lightning port, there's actually power for digital circuitry inside the headphones that can do all sorts of advanced signal processing. So you don't want your Bose noise canceling headphones anymore. What you want to do Yeah, sorry. You want to buy a new pair of noise canceling headphones that will work a lot. That will work a lot better.
Yeah,
they really will. They'll be much more effective. Now, I don't know if the new headphones that Apple is going to supply will include noise cancellation, but they certainly could, because almost certainly they're going to use the Cirrus chipset that Cirrus created for this, and that noise canceling capability is built into the chipset. So,
very cool.
Yeah, so it should be a really nice advancement. And then, of course, there's going to be a whole slew of Bluetooth wireless headphones that are also going to be made available. And I think ultimately, people will just move to wireless. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that seems to be a pretty big trend overall, especially when it comes to exercise and fitness.
Sure. And it also means that they can be used with the future Apple Watch. And the current Apple Watch already supports Bluetooth headphones and music playback. So the future Apple Watch will certainly do that as well. Okay, so then let's see. I'm trying to think what other new good stuff is coming out. Oh, the one thing that was kind of a late breaking rumor, which I actually really like the idea behind, is the concept that the home button will be no longer a mechanical switch. There'll still be a home button, but underneath the home button will be a pressure sensor, and it'll be like a force touch button. And you'll be able to press on it, and you'll get tactile feedback through the Taptic engine, but it's not a mechanical switch that sits underneath it. And I think Apple is probably going to go that route with all the mechanical buttons on the iPhone eventually. There's no rumors so far to the effect that they've done that for any of the other mechanical buttons on the iPhone that are typically there. Things like, the on-off sleep-wake switch and the volume buttons. But they certainly could do that. And what's the advantage of doing that? Well, it allows waterproofing, much more effective waterproofing of the phone. It's difficult to seal a mechanical button because it's sliding up and down, and Apple does try to seal them right now. They put little miniature rubber gaskets around each of these little buttons, but it's kind of debatable how well they work, and Apple doesn't try to claim that
so the difference would be, like, right now it's just it's a physical button, and you think in the next one it'll still be like maybe a button on the outside, but underneath it'll be more just like a pressure point, like the screens are, maybe, or not? Am I totally?
Well, yeah, it's like the screen in the sense that the button, there'll be a physical button, because that provides tactile feedback. You can find the button without having to look at the phone.
Right.
But there won't be an electrical switch sitting underneath it. Gotcha. Instead, there'll be a pressure sensor that just detects the pressure you're applying to the button. And you probably wouldn't notice any movement of the button because it really won't be moving significantly. Gotcha. And that's what will allow it to be sealed more effectively. So, the rumor about the home button probably applies equally to any other type of button on the phone. But it's not clear yet whether Apple actually has implemented that feature across all the other buttons, or if they're just going to start off with the home button.
Well, it's interesting because, my wife has the 6S, and because of the fingerprint technology, that's essentially what she does now anyway. She doesn't ever press the button. She just puts her thumb on there. And so it seems like it's kind of a one step in that direction already.
Yeah, because you can unlock the phone just by lightly touching the fingerprint sensor on the home button. You don't have to actually physically depress it and activate the switch.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that. And by the way, Apple patented some technology where eventually that fingerprint sensor would be available to use if you touch anywhere on the screen.
Wow.
But I haven't seen any rumors. I haven't heard any rumors that say that Apple's implementing that technology in this year's iPhone 7. I think that the rumors are probably accurate, that there'll still be a home button, that the fingerprint sensor will still be located under the home button. It actually looked a little challenging technically to implement that, because you have to have the right kind of sensors, and they have to be just distributed across the entire screen. And you have to do that in such a way that people don't notice it when they look at the screen. So it's not a trivial thing to do, but they did get a patent on that.
Right.
Trying to think about what else is going on. Well, of course, my favorite, the processor. It's always my favorite. But I still get a lot of comments about why does speeding up the processor make any difference? I mean, who cares if Facebook launches a little faster? And I think it's not just about making things that the iPhone already knows how to do a little faster. I think it's the processor development and the progress that's been made in mobile processors since iPhone 7, the first iPhone was introduced in 2007. I think that progress has enabled a lot of new functionality and new capability that just wasn't possible in the early days. And so it's not so much about just making things go a little bit faster. It's about enabling whole new capabilities that weren't possible before.
Could you detail a couple of those as far as what that means? Because we talked about that a little bit on our last interview, but how it's a way bigger deal than most of us think about, but we don't see it and it doesn't always feel like it. But what are some extra capabilities beyond just speed that would make us care about the processor?
I think, in fact, we have been seeing it. We just maybe didn't register. And one of the ways that processor innovation has fed directly into what users experience actually turns out to be in games. If you think about the kind of games that were available on so-called smartphones back when iPhone was introduced, you're talking about sort of Tetris level games where it's very, very simple two-dimensional animated graphics type games. And now when you look at what's available on the iOS App Store for iPhone and iPad, it's very sophisticated, 3D rendered, almost photorealistic, three-dimensional worlds that you can enter into and explore, either as first-person shooters or other types of games. And that kind of level of realism in games simply, wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for the underlying developments and advancements in processing technology. Because, believe it or not, those kinds of games are by far the most taxing thing that anybody ever does on their iPhone or iPad.
Well, I assume it also factors in, maybe not to the same high-level needs of the gaming you're describing, but the fact I can watch TV on my phone now. And I remember years ago, you couldn't watch TV on your iPhone. You might could stream it a little bit, but I can watch the Olympics on my iPhone. No, of course not. That's kind of a big deal.
Oh, sure. Well, the video capability is part of it, but in fact, that video capability doesn't strain the processor nearly as much as a good three-dimensional 3D shooter type game, because you've got physics engines running on the CPU side. You've got 3D rendering running on the graphics side. The processor is really fully engaged. And one of the things that's kind of unique about the iPhone and iPad is that, unlike most other smartphones and mobile devices, when you're playing one of these very, very taxing games, the processor does not throttle back on the game after a few minutes. And this has been well verified in reviews of many other devices, especially Android devices, is that because the processor demands are so great that what happens is the operating system throttles back on the frame rate of the game because it would just drain the battery too fast otherwise. That isn't the case with Apple. The frame rate you get at the beginning is pretty much the frame rate that you'll be playing a half hour or an hour later until the battery dies. But it'll take a long time. Apple's very, very good at conserving power, and this is another aspect of the innovation, processor innovation that Apple has achieved, is that in addition to these tremendous advancements in processing capability, they've also been able to really minimize the impact on battery life and power drain. And that's really also unique to Apple. So that's one example, and that was the one of the best examples I could think of in terms of really straining the limits of what the processors are capable of. And right now, Apple says, well, this is we're doing console level graphics. Well, it's probably last generation's console level graphics. It's not quite up to the current generation, and certainly not up to the level of a good high-end PC gaming rig, but it's still pretty sophisticated, and that just wouldn't be possible without the processor to support that. Now, looking into the future a little bit, looking forward a little bit, what's the sort of the next capability, the next big movement in smartphone and mobile device capability that will really tax the processor, and that's probably going to be locally hosted artificial intelligence. Right now, artificial intelligence is mostly hosted in the cloud. And so, you can make use of AI in various forms, like when you do Google search or when you try to order something from Amazon or whatever, or when you use Siri. Siri is hosted in the cloud and Apple's cloud. These are all examples of user interactions with AIs. But basically, the smartphone is just a conduit for your voice. And it's not really contributing too much, as far as I can tell. It's a little vague. There may be some low-level voice recognition that's going on locally, but most of it is being done remotely in the cloud. Well, now the trend seems to be to want to try to bring as much of that functionality into the phone itself as possible, and that's going to require whole new leaps in processor technology and capabilities to make that work, as well as big improvements in software. But I think it is coming. Qualcomm released what they call an AI API kit for their most advanced processor, which is the Snapdragon 820. And at first, when I saw that, I thought, AI on a smartphone, I don't really buy this. But I'm starting to take it much more seriously now, because I think that the processors are actually and becoming capable of performing significant AI locally, and there's significant advantages to doing that. One of which is, not the least of which, is security. The less you have to connect to the outside world, probably the more secure you are these days, and that's been highlighted by the recent announcements on the so-called zero-day exploits that Apple recently patched in their latest iOS 9. I think it's 9.35 release, which I did download and I encourage you to download as well, because the zero-day exploits were pretty scary. I mean,
so what was that? I think I'm not up to speed on what you mean.
Well, a zero-day exploit is by definition something that the developer of the hardware and/or operating system has no defense against, because it's 0 day and it hasn't been around long enough for anybody to spot it and come up with a countermeasure for it. So apparently, there's this Israeli company that specializes in that, and they've been selling them. It's almost like an arms trade in 0 day exploits, and they had developed some exploits that were being used against dissidents, Saudi Arabian dissidents, and people in the Middle East who apparently their governments wanted to spy on them. So they developed a software that would allow not only unauthorized entrance into an iPhone or an iOS device, but it would allow using that device as a listening device. It would allow remotely turning on the camera of the device to see what the device was looking at. It would allow monitoring of phone calls and messages. It would allow breaking through the normal encryption protection that Apple uses for a lot of communications that even the FBI had objections to. So it was a pretty scary scenario, and Apple.
That's when it makes you glad when you know you're not an important person and no one cares to listen to what you have to say.
Right. I'm not an important person.
No,
no one wants to listen to what I have to say.
Except on this podcast, of course. I'm referring to myself, not you.
No, I'm just so paranoid. No, as soon as I saw that report, well, I had read earlier reports of similar types of things that our own lovely government was trying to sponsor.
Yeah. See, I've heard of those capabilities being out there. I mean, how that would work or who can and can't do it. I always kind of just assumed, I mean, not to be a conspiracy theorist, I always kind of assumed if the government really wanted to do that, they would. But that may not be true. I don't know.
Who says it's a theory? I mean,
there you go.
Well, it could be a theory, but we know that our government spies on us. It's supposed to be all for our own good, but we know that they do that. Now, what wasn't clear was whether what was being talked about as desired capability had actually been achieved. When I saw these reports relating to the NSA and so forth, but apparently this Israeli company did achieve much of what was talked about in the prior report. So Apple rushed out a patch really, really fast for that, and that's why you should patch your phones.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, so far for the new iPhone, we've talked about the aluminum unibody. We've talked about some of the antenna bands disappearing or having a much lower profile, the new LCD screen being a higher upgraded color gambit, the new headphone jacks, which sounds pretty cool. The home
faster processor.
The faster processor, which is like we talked about last time on our interview. All of those are big advancements. Of course, but part of the rumors again are, hey, this is not going to be a really cool new iPhone. And everything we've talked about so far, apart from the headphone, are things that a lot of casual iPhone users may not necessarily notice. Are there any things on the radar that you're aware of that someone's going to want to run home with their new phone and show their buddy, like this new thing on the phone?
Yeah, I not that we've really heard through the rumor mill, but the rumor mill message has always been that there wasn't going to be any exciting innovations. So I'm not sure we would hear about exciting innovations if they existed. I'm hoping we'll get surprised. I mean, I really am. I'm dying for a surprise. I don't know that we'll get one in the phone itself, but there might be something in the way of accessories that could surprise us. And one of the things I was thinking about was this whole area of augmented reality and virtual reality. Several times now, Tim Cook has acknowledged that augmented reality is an area of interest for Apple, that they are working on that. And in the past, at least, when Tim Cook has said things like that, it meant that there was a product on the way. And, for instance, Tim Cook said roughly the same thing about wearables before Apple Watch came out. So, and I'm not the only one who's noticed this. A number of people, a number of articles have noticed that. Oh, that's interesting. That really sounds like there could be some sort of augmented reality, virtual reality type product.
Wow.
What that would be, I don't know, except that I think it would probably be, it would appear as an accessory to iPhone. And there is some precedent to that. When LG released their big flagship phone at Mobile World Congress, which was back in February, they also introduced a pair of VR goggles to go along with the phone. And essentially, you plug the goggles into the phone and use the phone's processor as the processing engine for the VR goggles. And the goggles had actually separate displays inside the goggles, but no other processing. So, if you think about like the state of VR technology right now, the most advanced VR technology from the likes of Facebook's company. I forget the name.
Oculus Rift.
Oculus, yeah. If you think about what Oculus and other similar types of offerings are like, they all require tethering to a PC because they're using the PC as the engine to do all the calculations and drive the display inside the goggles. In this case, you have, with LG, you had just the smartphone as the engine. So instead of being tethered to this big, heavy PC that you can't move around, so you're kind of locked in place, you can carry the smartphone with you, and so you have a lot more mobility. It's a nearly untethered kind of experience. You're still tethered to the smartphone, but at least you're not tethered to a big, heavy PC. Unless, of course, you want to carry it in a backpack, like has been recently showed. Where and I was stupefied when I saw these so-called backpack PCs that they were showing to be used with VR goggles, as if anyone would want to carry around a desktop class PC on their back.
I will say, first of all, I fully agree with you, but a buddy of mine, I'm not lying, one time he saw someone walk into like a Starbucks or something wearing one of the a desktop Mac. Just the monitor and everything's built into it. Like right. in a bag they're carrying in with them to like a Starbucks or something to work. And so I just thought, well, I guess if you want to.
Well, if you can find a place to plug it in.
That would definitely be extremely exceptional for sure. Right.
So, there are a lot of exciting things going on in augmented reality and virtual reality. I have expressed some skepticism about the market potential, but I think augmented reality certainly seems to have an awful lot of market potential. The whole Pokemon thing is an example of a very limited form of augmented reality. Microsoft's HoloLens is another example of augmented reality. So if Apple says that they're interested in augmented reality, I think that suggests very strongly that there's a product. Now, the question is, when will the product make an appearance? And I don't know that it will make an appearance on September 7th. That's still to be seen. But it's entirely possible. I don't think there's anything technologically that would hold Apple back from doing that. I think it's just a matter of how long they've been working on it, what they're trying to achieve, and whether they think they're ready.
That'd definitely be a very impressive, well-kept secret if they pull that out, for sure.
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's a secret, because I think everyone sort of realizes, just on the basis of what Tim Cook's been saying, because he reiterated fairly recently that same message, that Apple is working on this, but whether it's ready is the big question.
Right.
Whether it'll come out on September 7th. So back to the fundamental question: is there any real sort of killer feature that will really grab customers on iPhone 7? I don't know. Once again, I just hope we'll be surprised. I hope that there's something new in the offing that no one has thought about or rumored about or tried to create a mock-up for. One other thing I'm sorry I didn't mention.
Very Steve Jobs of you, by the way.
Yeah, right. One other important feature that we're also pretty sure that we know is coming is the dual camera feature on the plus size of the iPhone 7, and that's pretty innovative, and not too many smartphones are doing that yet, but a few have done it. And it's not clear exactly what Apple's going to do with that, because there's actually multiple ways to go with that. But I think the basic idea is that there are some built-in limitations on and now I'm going to get into sort of technical speak here in cameras, and let me know if you don't get this, but there's limitation on focal length, right, of the lens that you can create, and that plays into the how wide an angle you can see or don't see, or how close or far away things appear. the way you do that with an external separate physical camera is you have either multiple lenses that you can switch in and out, or you have like what's called a zoom lens,
right?
Which gives you a variable focal length over a nice wide range. Well, that's awfully hard to do in a smartphone. So the space constraints are just too great. So that's why people are kind of gravitating towards this multiple camera approach. It's easier to just build a separate camera with a different focal length lens. So there would essentially be one camera for wide angle shots, and then another camera for more telephoto narrow angle shots.
Very cool.
And that's probably the most important, actually, user-facing new feature that the iPhone 7 is widely expected to offer. That's been in the rumors since almost day one. Back in February, we started seeing that.
Well, regardless of how exciting or not exciting some of the new features are, all of us with iPhone 5s are eagerly awaiting the new phone. And like you said, we'll look forward to surprises, but for everyone listening, know that Mark and I plan on doing another podcast following the reveal on September 7th. So we'll be able to break down what does and does not happen and what we learned from that reveal then. And so we'll look forward to that. And Mark, thanks so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Okay, it was great being here, or being with you in cyberspace. And definitely looking forward to the post-reveal discussions. It should be very interesting. Hopefully, we, as I said, we will get some sort of surprise. I want to be surprised.
I'm texting Tim Cook right now, so hopefully he won't disappoint.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Right. Thanks, Mark.
Talk to you then. Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Mark Hibben. Remember, you can get full show notes with the links and other details at investorinthefamily.com. If you want to get the top 2 highest conviction investments from Cody Willard and Brett Jensen, free registration for the online investing conference ends on September 7th. Conference goes live on September 12th. All online, no travel or anything necessary. And again, the website is onlineinvestingconference.com. That's onlineinvestingconference.com. If you want to sign up for the email list, text the word join family, one word, to the number 44222, and you'll also get emails about registering there as well. This is Brian, and thanks for joining the family. The information and opinions contained on this podcast are for educational purposes only. The information does not consider the economic status or risk profile of any specific person. The information and opinions expressed should not be construed as investment trading advice and does not constitute an offer or an invitation to make an offer to buy and sell securities.